Good morning to everyone, and welcome to this webinar on connectivity in the G20, which is part of our webinar series on digital policies in the G20. My name is Luca Belli, I'm professor at FGV Law School, where I direct the Center for Technology and Society, and I will be the moderator of this session together with my colleague Larissa Gaudino-Magalhães, who is our associate researcher and also researcher at the UN e-government unit at the UN University. The reason of today's debate is precisely to explore which kind of nuances and dimensions are entailed by the concept of meaningful connectivity, and to what extent this concept is today effective or not. Now, before we start, let me quickly present our speakers. We have a very distinguished list of speakers today. So we will start with Renata Mieli, who works for the Brazilian Ministry for Science and Technology and also coordinate CGI.br, the Brazilian Internet Governance Steering Committee. Then we will pass the floor to Sonia Jorge, who is Directress of the Global Digital Inclusion Partnership. Then we will have Graciela Castello from CETIC, that has recently released a very interesting study on meaningful connectivity in Brazil. Ashta Kapoor, Directress of the Apti Institute from India. Our friend Luan Fergus, that was previously working with us at CTS and now leads IDEC's work on digital rights. The IDEC is the Brazilian Institute for Consumer Protection. Then we will have our good friend K.S. Park from the University of Korea, also director of OpenNet Korea. And then last, but of course not least, Henriette Esterhuizen, also very good friends. She leads digital rights and digital policy works at APC, the Association for Progressive Communications, and she has had very leading roles at the IGF, especially as chair of the IGF MAG. Now, before we start, let me just share the usual disclaimer by FGV. Of course, everyone here is participating willingly. Nobody has been obliged to participate, and all the opinions that will be shared are personal opinions and do not represent any official policy by FGV. Having said that, let's start to put some spices in our debate and understand why this concept of meaningful connectivity is essential, why it has been included, is so essential, it has been included as a priority by the G20 presidency of Brazil this year, and why, even if it is so essential and it is such an important priority, we are still so far from achieving it. Before giving the floor to our list of speakers that will present very both local and global perspective to this, exploring, for instance, to which extent we have meaningful connectivity in specific countries, to which extent some models like zero rating models of connectivity can undermine meaningful connectivity, to what extent new ideas like fair share can be useful or absolutely detrimental for meaningful connectivity. Now, before mapping these and also community-led initiatives that are a very important option to foster meaningful connectivity and connect the unconnected, let's just understand, let's try to understand with a little bit with Larissa, which kind of instrumental role connectivity plays to achieve the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. Please, Larissa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luca. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here today and to prepare this amazing webinar with outstanding colleagues. To ignite the debate, I will make some brief comments, mainly the point of view of digital transformation of the government, and also the massive adoption of emerging technology, which means artificial intelligence, and try give some ideas how it's important related to SDGs. As everybody knows, the connectivity is the backbone of digital transformation. However, to reach the meaningful connectivity requires some balance by government. I try to emphasize two levels of balance. First of all, related the government commitment to human rights or fundamental rights, and how it's related the comprehensive framework of laws, policies, regulations, governance structures, and how it must be capable to promote inclusion, education, participation, and obvious right to be connected. For instance, you can looking for the peaks and open finance in Brazil and try and understand how the project by central bank to promote citizenship has been long term and how it impacts in our interesting case in digital public infrastructure, for example. Finally, when you're looking for the second level, it's important you understand the state capabilities to promote the digital acceleration agenda of sustainable development goals. Why this is important? Almost 17% of the SDG goals depends of digital technology, which means AI or digital emerging technology and data. And as you know, without meaningful connectivity, we cannot promote a responsible AI, and otherwise we will increase our social divisions. So I just make some brief comments, and I open the floor for our speakers and to receive ideas, but also to share with us the results of some researches and the projects that they lead in their organizations. Thank you so much, Luca.
Fantastic. So yes, very good to highlight that actually on the one hand, meaningful connectivity is instrumental for the full enjoyment of human rights. On the other hand, it becomes a fundamental right itself. And without it, it's really impossible to trigger digital transformation, a sustainable digital transformation, right? Now, to explore this point, let me just briefly give the floor to our first guest, Renata Mieli, that is bringing us a little bit of insight on what the Brazilian presidency is doing in terms of priorities for the G20 with regard to meaningful connectivity, and how then this translates into national policymaking and proposals. Please, Renata, very welcome to you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luca, Larissa. Thank you for the FGV for the opportunity to discuss this important topic. It's a pleasure to be here with all you. I'm going to start sharing with you how the work is being carried out within the scope of the G20 Digital Economy Group. Our group is composed of the Ministry of Communication, Ministry of Science, Technology, Innovation, Secretary of Communication, SECOM, and Ministry of Management and Innovation. We have 4 ministries in our group. Each ministry is responsible for a priority topic in the group. And the topic of AI is under the coordination of MCTI, Minister of Science, Technology, Innovation. And I am the coordinator of this group. So I'm very enthused here. You understand a little bit. The topic of digital public infrastructure is under the coordination of the Minister of Governance and Innovation, MGI, information integrity with SECOM, and meaningful connectivity, which is our debate today, is under the coordination of the Ministry of Communications. So my role here today is to seek in the best possible way to bring a little bit how MCOM, Ministry of Communications, is working on this topic. First of all, it's important to highlight that the group's approach is aligned with international and national discussions that are advancing around meaningful connectivity. That's because a significant portion of the population still lacks access to universal and meaningful connectivity. That is, that available to everyone, which not only allows safe, satisfying, enriching, and productive online experiences at an affordable cost, but also includes the development of digital skills. This new concept of connectivity involves preserving digital rights, as Larissa said, and promotion the conscious, critical, ethical, and responsible use of technology. Digital technologies enable individuals to effectively navigate the digital world. On the G20, we intend to build a guideline for indicators and metrics for universal and meaningful connectivity. Last Friday, during the in-person meeting of the Digital Economic Group in Brasilia, took place a seminar about meaningful connectivity, which deepened fundamental aspects of the discussion perspective that our government is presenting on this topic. And I will just summarize some points here. It's important to say that our knowledge partner in this issue is ITU, with also the support of CETIC, an area of our structure of CGI and NIC that we are very proud of. And Graziella will bring some studies that we recently organized in a book. And I very, very recommend the reading of this, because it's very, very, very interesting, with a lot of data and information that support all the discussion about meaningful connectivity. Well, it's important to note that this initiative that we are organizing, G20, that I said, the building of guidelines for indicators and metrics for universal and meaningful connectivity, is not to intend to be a statistical assessment of connectivity levels in any particular demographic group, economy, region, or country, but the objectivity aims to establish a framework to conduct such assessments. This is important in a context that, despite the apparent ubiquity of the internet, digital divides persist. Some are deepening and new are emerging. And this is very important, because the internet is seen as something that democratizes all the aspects of life. But what we are seeing today is deepening and new divides emerging across and within countries, between men and women, between younger and older generations, between cities and rural areas, between those who uses access from fiber connection and those who uses a spot of 3G connection or other connection using mobile devices. So in that sense, universal and meaningful connectivity is the possibility for everyone to enjoy a safe, satisfying, enriching, productive online experiences at an affordable cost has become a new policy imperative to fully leverage the potential of connectivity for social and economic development. And that's our intention in this G20, to bring this approach for all the countries that is member of G20. Oh my God, my computer is low in the battery. I'm sorry. Now, well, our main goal is to look at universal meaningful connectivity as a policy priority, alerting about the pitfalls of connectivity and the need to mitigate its risks and adverse effects. The deliverable will feature a list of core standardized and comparable indicators for assessing the progress towards universal and meaningful connectivity across and within countries. The list, which will reflect the different dimensions of the universal meaningful connectivity concept, will likely consist of several tiers to reflect the different levels of maturity in terms of concept, availability, and quality. The aim of the list is to encourage countries to dedicate adequate resources to the measurement of key concepts of connectivity as part of their journey towards universal meaningful connectivity. And in this sense, it is very important to Brazil because this guideline will be used to give the basis of our own policies in this area, because this divide is so large in our country. As Lucas said, there is still a long way to go for society to reduce digital inequalities and achieve the principles for a free, open, safe, and inclusive internet. In Brazil, we are dealing with this because we have difficulties in rural areas. We have challenges that is about our geographic particularities. We have difficulties in the Amazonia region. We have difficulties within the very deep countries, but not only. If we look at the big cities as São Paulo, we still have a large portion of communities and people who doesn't has the access in either meaningful connectivity. In this sense, to finish and to say some words as a coordinator of our Internet Steering Committee, the CGI has promoted several actions with the aim of consolidation proposals for the evolution and implementation of the multi-stakeholder approach to Internet governance and digital governance in a more inclusive, diverse, and responsible way. And the work Graziella will share with us is one of these actions. So thank you very much, and I am here following all the other speakers. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Renata, for this. And actually, it really brings us to the core of the question of meaningful connectivity, which is something, a concept that together with Sonia, we started work on more than 8 years ago, precisely understanding that not all types of connectivity is the same. It's an oversimplification thinking that we can only assess connectivity in quantitative terms. We also have to introduce qualitative criteria to understand how people are connected and to which extent they are connected. Having said this, please, Sonia, the floor is yours to let us know what is really this concept of meaningful connectivity and to what extent we are able today to say that we are achieving it or not.
Great. Can you all hear me okay, Luca?
Yes, very well.
Okay, wonderful. Let me make sure that I can do the slideshow properly so you can all see it with a big screen and not just on the side. So great. Thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me to be here. It's really a pleasure. It feels like a reunion from last week. So many of us again here, Renata, Graziella, you, Lua, and many others. It's always a pleasure to join FGV and, of course, the colleagues in Brazil who are doing tremendous work to not only advance these agenda, but really to also bring clarity to it and what it means, not just to Brazil, but to other countries in the global majority. And that is a really important feat that I wanted to point out. For us at GDIP, as you pointed out as well, Luca, we've been working on the concept of meaningful connectivity for quite some years now. And it was inspired by two important elements that I wanted to share with all of you here. One, when we fought our team at the time, we had a different name, but at the time, our team was very concerned and was very focused around the affordability of connectivity. And it soon became very clear to us after we did a lot of work on determining what it meant for internet to be affordable and for broadband to be affordable for people around the world, especially people in global majority countries across different income quintiles and different dimensions of the socioeconomic characteristics that they carry with themselves. It was very clear to us that affordability alone never really reflected the entirety of the experience of what it means to be online, what it means to be engaged with digital opportunity, and with all of the benefits that we think are really important to be engaged with digital. Also, it didn't in any way, shape, or form accounted for and made us think about a lot of the rights issues that are so important, that many here on this call also have called attention for so many years, including our colleagues from APC, many colleagues from Brazil and other countries around the world that have worked on a human rights-based framework to influence our thinking around connectivity. And so understanding and recognizing the limitations of looking at connectivity just from an affordability perspective, we started to think about the quality of the connectivity, but also all the other elements that shape and change how we interact with connectivity. And so we've been doing a lot of work for many years. And actually this year, just last month, we published the report that you see on the slide, Connected Resilience, Gendered Experiences of Meaningful Connectivity Through a Global Pandemic. And why gender? Because the gender digital divide remains the largest that we encounter in the digital world when it comes to connectivity. So using a gender lens has also helped us think about meaningful connectivity as a framework that is not only more comprehensive, but that it's from its foundation, gender informed, gender aware, and that it looks at all of the dimensions of connectivity from that perspective. So a lot of what I'm going to share with you now, you can find in that report that we published. So please feel free, and I invite you to engage with the report, look at it, and learn more from it. And of course, come back to our team and many of the ones here on the webinar that can speak to these, especially from their country experience, including Graciela, who's going to share with you this fantastic research that she and her team has done in Brazil, which is really not only the most comprehensive done by far anywhere in the world on this topic, but one that reflects the importance of looking from this perspective. Why universal meaningful connectivity is the framework that we need to really not just compare each other with each other, but really help standardize the goals and the targets that we want to reach. And so what does it mean? What is meaningful connectivity really? First of all, let me say it's something that has also been evolving. It's a concept that has been evolving as we learn more about all of the interactions of what it means to be in a digital environment. And it involves what we call three elements that start with affordable access. We all know what that means. The technical elements, that's where the name came from, meaningful connectivity. The technical elements of connectivity, which means that everyone, regardless of where they are, who they are, what race they are, which location, which ethnicity, which preferences they might have, everyone needs to have the same minimum level of quality of connection, meaning 4G-like speeds, appropriate devices, unlimited broadband connection, daily use, but then, most importantly, and never forgetting, the supportive social environment that not only sustains, but that it reminds us of who we are as humans interacting with technology. And so that supportive social environment, it's about the education and skills that we utilize and benefit from when we engage with technology as users, creators, producers, developers, you name it. However, we, with our own full agency, decide we want to interact with technology. The relevant content that exists in that space for us to benefit from it. And when we talk about content, we don't forget about language and other issues related to our full diversity, as well as respecting of human rights. So it's a framework that brings together all of these elements in a way that not only we understand the concept, but then it challenges us to then measure our ability to engage with technology from this perspective that is more holistic, comprehensive, diverse, and in a way, yes, challenging, but a challenge that we must all embrace, because otherwise, as on the top of the slide you can see, from a gender perspective alone, I'm not even talking about geography here and other things, but from a gender perspective alone, without meaningful connectivity from this perspective, in 5 years, the world is about to lose $500 billion, and the numbers are only bigger if you look even more. In our report, you can see some of the estimates of what we've lost in the last decade and what we are about to lose if we don't take action. And the kind of action that Renata was mentioning, that the government of Brazil is taking, and really leveraging and taking full advantage of the opportunity of the presidency with the G20 to be influential, to change the mindsets, to change the paradigm around universal meaningful connectivity and people's ability to embrace this concept as the standard in our digital world. So I'm very, very happy and proud of the fact that the Brazilian government is doing that. And I'm again proud because I've been part of that effort and I continue to support. And I think the work that is being done in that space is just phenomenal. What I'm showing you here on the slides, you can see, and again, it's on the report, the two things I wanted to share with you for you to understand why it's important to think of meaningful connectivity. So in our report, we look at and we share lots of different pieces of data, but two that I really think are critical for us to look in here. When we think about connectivity, we have these three terms that we use. We look at the unconnected, we look at those that are meaningfully connected, but we also look at the ones that are just marginally connected. So they are connected, but not connected meaningfully, which is the goal that we are talking about here. And when you look at it, the two greatest, I mentioned gender is one of the greatest gaps when you think about it from this perspective, but rurality is also. So the difference between rural and urban populations is massive. In Brazil, I won't say any detail because Graciela has amazing data to share with us. But what it means here is that rural populations are far more marginally connected and behind in the world than rural populations. And then on this other small chart that I share here, the point of sharing this with you, I wanted to highlight with you is that, and this is all based on gender, right? This is also totally informed by the gender perspective. This is about women's engagement in connectivity, because that was the focus of the study. Education is by far the most important determinant of the ability of people to be meaningfully connected, especially women. So women who have the highest level of education, as you can see here, tertiary education, also are more likely to have, because they will have higher incomes, etc., but they will have greater engagement and meaningful engagement with connectivity. And lower education levels reduce tremendously those opportunities. And so, to not go too much farther than the 10 minutes that I was allocated, I want to mention to you four we call tiers of achievable solutions that we propose from looking at the meaningful connectivity concept. Why? Because when you think about universal meaningful connectivity, it's a much more complex way of thinking about the solutions of connectivity. You can't just think about infrastructure, as Renata pointed out. You cannot just think about rights, as Larissa pointed out. You have to think about the full equation, the full magnitude, right, of what the challenges that we have ahead of us as we create these societies where we as humans interact with digital in a way that it becomes not just a right, but it becomes part of our nature. And so because of that, it also requires more creative solutions and different ways of thinking at meaningful connectivity. And so we propose these 4 elements: deep investments, grand visions, easy wins, and scalable systems. I'm not going to go into the details with what each of them mean, but I want to just point out one thing for you before I stop. Scalable systems. Why is this important? Because we know that the status quo has not worked. And even when we think about the countries that have made an effort to embrace, elements of meaningful connectivity as they change and update and revise their digital policies, one thing that the digital sector has not been able to do well at all, and we need to actually learn from other sectors, is about thinking from a systems perspective. And what are the elements of the systems in digital development that not only can be scalable, but can be changed for skill? It's not everything, but there are some elements that are very important. And I'm sure Henriette is going to talk about community-based solutions and community-based networks, which are one of those areas that systems have to adapt and change to embrace and support for their expansion. But we haven't done a good job about that, and we need to. So we need to think about not just one kind of envelope of possibilities, but actually a multitude of possibilities that together form a puzzle that will provide an opportunity for universal meaningful connectivity to become more of a reality and for us to be on the path to reach those goals. So I'll stop there. Thank you so much. It's really, really a pleasure to always be here, and I can't wait for the discussion and to hear from others. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sonia. And indeed, I think the work you have been leading has been very inspiring and has been complemented and complementary to a lot of other initiatives that we have tried to gather here today to understand precisely the complexity of the issue and how we should approach this precisely as you were saying from a system perspective. So understanding there is no silver bullet, but there are also a lot of different challenges and dimensions that we need to address. The CETIC, that is a body linked to CGI and NIC.br in Brazil, has done a tremendous work to try to translate what we are discussing, these different dimensions in specific indicators to meter the level of meaningful connectivity in Brazil. So let me give the floor to Graciela Castello, that led this work together with our friend Alexandre Barbosa. So please, Graciela, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Luca. Thank you, every colleague here. It's a pleasure to be here with you, from whom I learned a lot every time. So it's a great opportunity to discuss with these brilliant people in this panel. Let me just share my presentation here. I will have a few slides to present. Let's see if you're, I guess it's okay. Perfect. So today I will be giving you a brief overview of the study that we just released at CETIC last week, actually, on meaningful connectivity. The study was presented during the G20 meeting on digital economy in Brasilia last week. Some of my colleagues already seen that, so I'm glad to discuss again. CETIC is a department of NIC.br and has been studying technology trends across various sectors for almost 2 decades. The publication that you can see the cover in the slide, Meaningful Connectivity, Measurement Proposals, and the Portrait of the Population in Brazil, offers insights into how we can measure meaningful connectivity. It includes a prologue from Renata Miele, she's calling for the promotion of meaningful connectivity. We have the republication of an RTU article proposing indicators on meaningful and on universal and meaningful connectivity. We have there as well a chapter by Sonia Georgi, the wonderful speaker that we just saw now, and her colleague Onika from GGIP. That is outlining guidelines for measurement and policy development on the subject. And finally, we have a chapter from Fernando Rojas from ICLAC that is sharing with us some regional experiences from Latin America. The digital book you can find on our website, cetic.br, in English and in Portuguese, and in Spanish as well next week. And today, in my speech, I will present to you the chapter 3 that is dedicated to analyzing meaningful connectivity in Brazil. That is the diagnosis of the Brazilian population based on indicators from the ICT household survey to understand the quality of access to digital technologies. In Brazil, as you can see in the graph, most people, 84%, are internet users, and almost all of them, 95%, use it every day. This has increased a lot in the past years. If we back to 2008, 15 years ago, only about a third of Brazilians were internet users, and only half of them use it daily. When we examine the situation, it appears that the country is well connected. In a way, this is true. However, do all the people have the right conditions for connectivity? That was the question guiding our investigation. So, to develop the study, we found the concept of meaningful connectivity, and from it, we started this analytical and conceptual framework, as you can see in figure 1. We start with what was available on the literature at the time, and from both the A4AI, now GDIP, and the IT propositions for measuring meaningful connectivity, we analyzed our data available at CETIC in Brazil. So what we did was to look through the proposed indicators by ITU and the dimensions suggested by A4AI, and we analyzed the indicators we had on an historical basis on our ICT household survey, in order to see which of them might help us to understand, in a more broader perspective, the quality of connectivity for the Brazilians. From that analysis, we defined 9 indicators across 4 dimensions to understand the levels of meaningful connectivity in the population. Those dimensions are what we are calling the critical enabling factors for meaningful connectivity. The first dimension that you can see is affordability, which looks at how much it costs to stay connected. The second one is access to equipment, which checks if people have the right devices for what they want to do. The third is the quality of connections to see if they are reliable and fast. And the fourth is connectivity environment, which looks to the frequency and the locations of internet usage. It's important to note that in addition to enabling factors, the analysis also explore connectivity gaps by examining data across territorial, social demographic, and socioeconomic dimensions. And we included an additional layer of analysis exploring the association between connectivity and the qualification and the type of internet usage, including digital skills and online activities on the analysis. So, as you can see in figure 2, the 9 indicators derived from these 4 dimensions generated a scale from 0 to 9. It means that each individual in our survey has a score. An individual that has that can have none of the indicators score 0, or it can have 1 out of 9, 2 out of 9, 3 out of 9, 6 out of 9, until all 9 indicators. And we divided this scale into 4 categories. The first one is those with the worst connectivity conditions. It's the red one, with score 0 to 2. The second one, the light red or the pink one, is those with score 3 and 4 that we are assuming still have lower conditions of connectivity. Then the third one is those with score 5 or 6, the light blue. And finally, on the darker blue, we have those that we are assuming that has satisfactory conditions of connectivity with scores between 7 and 9. And when we look through our data, considering those categories, what we see in Brazil is that just 22% of the Brazilians in 2023 were in the highest scores or were in the highest score range of meaningful connectivity between 7 and 9 points. Unfortunately, the largest observed group has the worst performance, up to 2 points, representing 1/3, 33% of the Brazilian population. It's a much more challenging scenario than when we just look on the 84% of internet users in Brazil, right? So just to present a few examples of the analysis that we conducted considering the social demographic, socioeconomic, and territorial levels, dimensions, I selected here some indicators to show you in more details. When we analyze the level of meaningful connectivity by area, gender, race, and socioeconomic status, for example, we see the huge inequalities of access in Brazil. Only 7% of those that lives in rural area against 25% of those who lives in urban areas have good conditions of connectivity. Women have a worse scenario than men. Only 17% of them have good conditions against 28%. And here I just would like to do a pause, because when we look at the raw data of internet users in Brazil, normally we say there is no gender gap, because the proportion of women that are internet users are quite similar to the men, and those who have access on their households are similar as well. In some cases, even bigger. But when you analyze, considering this overlap of layers that are necessary to guarantee a good quality of access, we see the huge gender gap in Brazil. So the numbers are in fact translating what we see. Like, are the mothers that are the persons who are dividing their devices with the children when they need, all the stuff that we are there, the women that has like low salaries in order to afford better devices or good internet connections, and all of the stuff that we already know. Race is another determinant factor. So you can see the huge difference between those who declare themselves as white and those who are brown or black. It's like only 18% of those who declare themselves as black or brown have a satisfactory meaningful connectivity level, against the 32% of those who are white. And again, if we look to the socioeconomic level, the differences are impressive, right? Just to compare those from the socioeconomic level A with those with the socioeconomic level D, E, the top and the bottom of the economic classification in this case, we are seeing this opposite scenario, no? Like in the socioeconomic level A, 83% of the population have good conditions of meaningful connectivity, In other hand, on the socioeconomic level DE, only 1% of these people have good conditions of connectivity. Unfortunately, the territorial dimension as well reveals these historical inequalities in Brazil. As you can see in the map, the states in pink have the worst conditions, and they are located mostly in the north and northeast regions, which has the lower proportions of individuals with satisfactory meaningful connectivity. And finally, I would just like to present some data from the layer of analysis that addressed the relation between meaningful connectivity and qualification for the internet usage. I just want to highlight the direct association between an individual's level of meaningful connectivity and their digital skills. Higher meaningful connectivity scores are associated with better skills to deal with technologies. From technical skills like knowing how to attach a file in a message, for example, until skills aimed at using the internet in a secure and reliable manner, measured by activities related to browsing safety, privacy protection, and the verification of information accessed online. As you can see in the charts, both of them, as the meaningful connectivity levels go up, more people have the digital skills assessed. I will end my presentation here and hopefully have more time on the debate to discuss all these questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Graciela, and to really showing us how the concept we have been discussing for the past 8 or 9 years can be really translated into key elements to assess the connectivity, the meaningful connectivity level of a specific country, specific population, and also on the other hand, to let us understand that the rosy picture that we have been promoting over the past years is very naive or falsely naive to some extent, because it is striking the data that you brought. 22%. We are not speaking about 22% of the entire Brazilian population having meaningful connectivity. It's 22% of the 84% that are supposedly considered as connected. So we are even considering even less than 22%, about 18 or 19% of the
No, it's from the total population, because
it's from the
total population, yeah.
Okay, excellent. But anyway, if we are speaking about 22%, it's a 1/4 of what we supposedly think is the reality. So it's really impressive, the work you have done, and it's really a very concrete evidence for policymaker to act and to do something. Now, let's try to move our focus from Latin America to Asia. So we giving the floor to Ashta Kapoor, who leads the APTI Institute. They have been working a lot on connectivity issues over the past years, and they have a very interesting perspective on how this has been instrumental to facilitate digital transformation in India to some extent, but also which are the potential side effects of the Indian policies. Please, Ashta, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me and also for this incredible discussion. It's always nice to talk about India and Brazil together because there are so many overlaps and complementarities. And it's been made clear in the presentations before me. A quick introduction. I'm Ashta Kapoor. I'm the co-founder of APTI Institute. We do a lot of work, as Luca mentioned, on the intersection of technology and society. And over the last few years, we've really dig deep into the idea of digital public infrastructure. And for everyone who's been following the G20 discourse, DPIs or digital public infrastructure have become quite a central piece because digital public infrastructure are open, interoperable, extensive, publicly orchestrated technologies that allow for meaningful connectivity, because the objective is that it can be built for scale. It is built in such a way that there is no vendor lock-in, because interoperability is one of the key tenets of what DPIs are. And also it is this interesting combination through which the private sector and the public sector can work together in the domain of technology. So the way it's usually described is that these are digital railroads on which private vehicles can run. Because what this does is it actually started off in the context of India from the perspective of digital IT, because in the early 2000s, like I guess late 2000s, it was realized that Indians had a bunch of different IDs, but still there were a lot of people who had no. So if you were privileged, you had, many IDs, driver's license, passport, etc. But if you were not in this small, I guess, percentage of the population, you had no way of proving who you were, and therefore you had no way of accessing the state or holding the state accountable for what it owed you. So in that context, India's digital ID program was birthed. And over the years, what we've seen is a proliferation of these digital public infrastructures that exist as digital ID, which is obviously a big example. It's called Aadhaar. Over 1 billion people have it. And now it's connected to very many different things. So this is the way that the state sees you. This is the way that the state makes scholarships and pensions available to you. And it has helped connect very significantly people to the state. So I think one of the bits of meaningful connectivity is, I think, that relationship with the state and the citizen, and not just with the citizen and technology. So that's one part of it. The second bit of digital public infrastructure, which of course we know from studying everything that's been happening in Brazil, is a payments infrastructure. Much like PIX, India has what is called the Unified Payment Interface, and it is doing over 1 billion transactions every month. And of course, that is just a testament of India's scale, but impressive nonetheless. There are newer digital public infrastructures that are looking at disrupting things like mobility. So there's something called the Beacon Protocol, through which you can build mobility interfaces. So in the city that I live in Bangalore, tuk-tuk drivers or auto drivers have come together along with a technology provider to build an Uber for auto rickshaws. But what it does is it removes the middleman, it removes the commissions. It's a subscription model, along with obviously payments for rides that are negotiated directly between the individual who is the rider and the driver. So the other part of meaningful connectivity to me is, I think, agency, which is that how does connectivity enhance agency for its users? And then the third part, which is a piece of work that we've been doing a lot, because so much has been mentioned on gender and it's so valuable, but what we've been thinking very critically about is the idea of trust. Because in the last 10 years, we in India have run under the assumption that if you build open, interoperable, extensible technologies, such as in the form of digital public infrastructure, and you have an innovative marketplace, you have a state that is committed to building these digital railroads, people will have access. But of course, when you look at India's usage of smartphones, an abysmal 31% of women have access to smartphones. So connectivity, even in its most noble form, in its most desirable form, is actually not percolating down in any meaningful way. And we've been thinking very critically about ideas of digital trust, particularly among women, because what we've realized is that it is not a concept of build and they will come. It is not a concept of give a phone in every hand. It's not the concept of, making things available, because the government of India has really, really invested, along with the private sector, in reaching the last mile. Bank accounts have been opened, mobile phones have been given, digital identity has been created, public payment protocols, as I mentioned, have been built. So it's all there, but still usage is very limited. And I think this is about trust, because of a negotiation that women have to go through every day with their social and patriarchal perspectives, a sense of confidence that they have in their own abilities. And then, of course, ideas of connectivity. Is the infrastructure there? Is do you get 4G on your mobile in a continuous and reliable manner? But what our work is uncovering is that because trust is such a negotiated space, meaningful connectivity is actually hinged on the idea of trust. So I'll give you an example. One of the things that, as I mentioned, is the payments protocol. Everybody was like, this is a great payments protocol. You don't even need a bank account number. You can just have a unique identifier, which will allow people to transfer money from point A to point B. And then people realized that that's actually not something that people who have been using cash for such a long time will do. The magic of digital payments is too much. It's too opaque. It's too quick. So people need some mechanism of feedback. So now in many, many stores across India, there's a little machine which is actually linked to the payment machine, which says when you scan the QR code and you send money, it actually calls out that X rupees have been received, because people need to hear that. People need to because the trust in digital is what is actually enabling or disabling people's usage of technologies. And so we've realized that feedback is a really, really important part of that trust. The other thing is ideas of, again, one of the things that people talk about often in the perspective of countries such as India is that privacy is not necessarily an important thing. It's such a communal place. There's so many people, there's no privacy, that's necessary in India. But what we've realized, again, in the context of women using mobile phones, is that they're using a lot of APKs that allow them to hide their identity from their partners, from the people they meet online, from making sure that, as you see Instagram stories, your name is not revealed. So women are seeking a sense of agency and control over their data as they engage online because of how surveilled their usage is. So as we think about connectivity, we obviously have to think about the circumstances under which connectivity is being, I guess, made available. And the other thing I think is that and because there's a certain, and I'll say this, a Western view about how technology and connectivity is an individual experience. Mobile phones are individual devices. But what we are realizing is actually, as we go into and talk to more and more women, that we always have to ask the question, is this your phone? Is this the phone of the household? Is this the phone of your husband? Do you share it with your son? So that the fact that phones are actually shared devices in the same way that we are able to access Netflix in 4 accounts, people need very different things from the same device. So how do we think of that shared experience as also something that straddles connectivity? So to me, I think that meaningful connectivity is one part, obviously, the availability of the infrastructure. The second part is choice, which is that are we able to give users choice between vendors, between operators? The third is ideas of agency, which is, how do we embody the agency that people want to exercise in this? And then the fourth one to me is trust. And as we look through the India story, everything that we've learned over the last 10 years, the fact that there is, as I mentioned, ubiquitous, reliable technology, but still where the breakdowns are in the aspect of trust. And we are not building at the moment for trust. We are just building for scale because that was the problem we were looking to solve. But what we're not building for is making sure that people come back, because the space between trust and mistrust is so quick. And when someone falls in the distrust space, it's very hard to answer. So it's almost like a snakes and ladders. You get bitten and you fall right back. And especially for women, to make sure that they come back on that ladder requires reinforcement, feedback, agency, which technology is not currently built for. So I'll pause there.
Thank you very much, Ashta, to bring this additional, very strong and important perspective from India. And actually, it is, we have had over the past years a lot of debates on digital public infrastructures. And it is very important to stress that, as you were mentioning, without meaningful connectivity, you don't have digital public infrastructure, but also the type of connectivity then you have is only one of the enablers. There are further layers of complexity that we have to consider. And at the end of the day, and this is something that, as this webinar also is part of, is an official T20 side event, so part of the group of think tank of the G20. Something that I also want to bring to the fore is something that I wrote last year for the T20 in an essay on good digital sovereignty. The fact that having meaningful connectivity and digital public infrastructure is actually something key for the good digital sovereignty of the nation, but also the individuals. The fact that you understand the technology, you develop the technology because you are connected, and then you can also regulate it according to your values. And this could be the national perspective of regulating how some technology works, but also could also be the individual or the community perspective of deciding to use the technology in a certain way and not to be obliged and forced to use it in other ways. Now, this is very important consideration, what you brought, Ashta, and what I was mentioning also in terms of digital public infrastructure, because India is also an outlier in the global south, because India has prohibited zero-rating practices with strong net neutrality enforcement in 2016, and is the only country in the global south that did it. And I believe this is one of the key reasons why it experienced an enormous a decade almost of innovation, because everyone can use whatever they want, and digital public infrastructure are accessible to everyone because there are no restrictions. Is absolutely not the case in the rest of the global south. And Loa Cruz with his colleague at IDEC did a wonderful study about this a couple of years ago. Please, Loa, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Do you listen to me? Is everything fine? Okay. So first of all, it's really a pleasure to be here, not only because of all these great fellow speakers, but because, as Luca mentioned, I worked for several years at FGV. So it's really great to be here at the event. But this time, as it's a webinar with flip-flops, which is forbidden in the building of FGV, if you're not aware. But first of all, I would like to present myself. I'm Loa Cruz. I coordinate the Digital Rights and Telecommunications program at IDEC. IDEC is the Brazil Institute for Consumer Protection. It's an NGO that's been working on telecommunication issues since the 80s. So it's almost 40 years on working on these issues, mainly on telecommunications, and for the last 20, 25 years on access to the internet. And this year, as Luca mentioned, also Brazil's host the presidency for the G20, and IDEC is the coordinator of the working group on digitalization and technology within the C20, which is the engagement group for the civil society. Besides that, I'm also a Green Web a fellow at the Green Web Foundation, where I study the arrival of the Starlink satellites in the Amazon. And I think that's all connected. First of all, I would like to talk about a little about the work that we've been doing at IDEC regarding meaningful connectivity. In the last 20 years, or in the last governments, Brazilian governments have assigned a low priority to telecommunications. So thinking about that, we did a lot of research on the last years, mainly trying to understand and trying to see what are the problems related to access to the internet in Brazil, and trying also to give some other perspectives beyond the ones that are presented by CETIC, who does amazing work, but especially trying to focus on mobile access and the zero rating schemes that we have in Brazil, especially because mobile access to the internet in Brazil is the main one, and especially in the lower classes. So in the last decades, we've been trying to put some regulation, to put some enforcement, and also to create some public policies and push for public policies that advance the creation of telecommunications infrastructures in Brazil. And in this week, we are celebrating the 10 years of the civil rights framework for the internet, the Marco Civil, which established the principle of net neutrality in our regulation, in our national regulation. But instead of being a huge celebration, when everyone mentioned the 10 years of the Marco Civil, one of the main concern points is related to the network neutrality principle that were never fully enforced in Brazil, different from India that did this work several years ago. We're still fighting against the zero rating practices in Brazil, and I think this is really important and really connects with the research that Graziella mentioned, especially because when you see the data on daily access or the frequency of use, we discovered that this use is mainly through Meta's application. So people have access to the internet, but just through one small part of the internet, which it is Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram. And in our research, our specific research on mobile access to the internet, we not only discovered that people get cut off of the whole internet in the middle of the month, from the day 19 to the day 23. And after that, people only have access to these specific applications, or they have to search for access in public Wi-Fi's, or having someone to share their mobile internet for them. So it's not meaningful connectivity. And one of the main things that zero rating and meaningful connectivities for us, they are opposite concepts. And this is really important to state because in all these events that we are going, I already heard from people and from public officials, mainly from the national telecommunications here in Brazil, that zero rating and meaningful connectivity could like work together. They could be put on the same table. And we don't think that is true, especially because when you talk about not only frequency of use, but how you use the internet, this is really a huge problem for us. And this is something that we identify in our research and trying to get some points that Este mentioned. For us, zero rating is really a problem because it has a really strict relation with access to rights. So we discovered that in our research, we discovered that 33% of people from the lower classes in Brazil have already been unable to access public services and all kinds of public services, from health services, educational services, and social benefits. Specifically on social benefits, we discovered that 28% of lower class population had difficulties accessing social benefits. And this is a really huge problem, especially because this research was made during the pandemic, where people couldn't work or even couldn't get food on their table. So we definitely, the internet access, it's important for the economy, to access social media, to communicate with like other fellows. But for us, the main issue on zero rating practice is because they put some difficulties on access to rights. Another point that I really want to mention and do some connections with what Graziella mentioned is about the racial dimension. In our research, we also highlighted that because the Black internet users from lower classes, they have a poor mobile internet access when compared to the non-Black internet users. So, and the data show that the Black and poor users are the ones who most often subscribe to prepaid plans, and they have more expensive gigabytes, and they have like this limited data cap. So there is this racial component that is really important to mention, especially because Brazil is one of the main Black countries outside of Africa. And just to continue, not just to talk about the research, is because after years of neglect in telecommunications policies in Brazil, communities are trying to seek their own solutions. And that's include not only community networks, but also hiring satellite services. And these are becoming a huge problem for us, especially because the main internet services provider in Brazil are the ones from Starlink, which is owned by Elon Musk, which now trying to put some influence on national policies. So these years and decades of negligence on telecommunications policy we are facing, and we are seeing the surge of several other side effects. This is just one of these. And the other one side effect that's really important is related to the new fair shares proposals bring by the telecommunications providers, which are trying to get more money from the big techs right now. After getting a lot of money from the government to universalize the internet and not making it, now they are trying to get the money from big techs to, I don't know, more profit and not doing what they should have done in the last decades, as I mentioned. So, but one of the main highlights on this discussion is that, once again, the telecommunications agencies is on the side of the telecommunications operators. And just one fun fact is that the national telecommunications agencies, they published a first public consultation which was everybody against it and just the telcos in favor of that. And what the telecommunications agency did, they opened a new public consultation on the same topic, trying to see if the game could change in this meantime. But one of the last positions of the government was made by the Minister of Communications. And when he said that the fair share proposal is not going to thrive, and the government, the Brazilian government, are trying to set up a different way of charge big techs, probably creating a fund that is, the big techs are going to pay some money to a public fund, and then the government and probably a multi-stakeholder steering committee will run this fund to try to bridge the gap of connectivity. So this was a great news for us, but this discussions is still ongoing. So we have to be alert, not only to fight back this kind of proposal, but also to push forward the policies and the regulations that we already have in Brazil. As I mentioned, net neutrality, it's a principle that is enshrined in our national regulation, and is also enshrined in some government decrees. And I guess that's the main point that I have to say to you. We have a lot of work to do, a lot of policy to push forward. And I think that the presidency of G20 in Brazil is a great opportunity to push forward, not only in Brazil, but for the whole other countries that still don't have net neutrality really enforced, as India and Europe. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luis, for these very important points. Actually, there are two elements that I really want to emphasize because they're very important for our discussion. The first one, as you were mentioning, the fact that there is an overlap between those who, according to SETIC, do not have meaningful connectivity, and those whose internet experience is basically only zero-rated applications. And what the perversion of this is that rather than having created an environment with digital public infrastructures like India did, we have created an environment with digital private infrastructure that concentrate attention and shape how the entire economy, society, and democracy work based on a very reduced number of corporations. We may even argue only one conglomerate that leverages an enormous power on, again, not only in the economy, but also on society and democracy. And on the other hand, the fact that, which is very almost schizophrenic to some extent, the fact that at the same point, in Brazil or in other country, internet access provider, major internet access provider, because let's remind this, it's not all the access provider, it's those with relevant market power are lobbying for fair share. But the reason why they are lobbying for fair share is because networks are, according to their analysis, congested by very few platforms. But the reason why these platforms are using so much bandwidth is because they have been subsidized, they have been zero-rated for 8 years. So it is absurd. It is a policy that is very much in its rational absurd, because the very reason why the network is congested is because the country, in the case of Brazil, has been having zero rating for 8 years. And so let's try to understand, because this last point of fair share has been in the news a lot over the past years, to some extent is fading away, but then is coming back again in other discussions. So let's try to understand how this in practice worked. And KS Park, you have very good experience on this, because Korea is the only country that implemented this, and the experience is not very convincing. Please, KS, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think I'm very happy that connectivity is a part of SDG. And the reason connectivity has become part of SDG is because of the internet. I mean, if it was a phone network, it would not have been. The fact that internet is such people-centered communication that gives powerless individuals voices, tools for mass communication without having to rely on newspapers and televisions that have limited spaces that are usually occupied by celebrities and politicians and other important people internet gives a chance for everyone to upload something that can be viewed by everyone else around the world. And internet has made it possible. The internet has used a promise and science to deliver a communication platform where people can talk to one another at massive scale. Pre-internet, you have to pay like $20 to be on a phone call, on international phone call with others. Even with one person, with the internet, 100 people can be on a video call at practically zero cost. Now, what made that possible is a promise and science. Now, that promise is a net neutrality, that data traffic will be delivered, not just free of discrimination on the content, destination, originator, but also free of cost. You pay to connect to the internet. You don't pay for data traffic. That has been the rule. Now, if a meaningful connectivity means anything, with a focus on meaningful, this arrangement should not change. That arrangement should be preserved. And that's what Korea has not done well. Before jumping into Korea, let me talk just a little bit more about meaningful connectivity. Meaningful connectivity should not create a chilling effect on speakers. People should not be worried about the cost of sending their messages to others. Now, the fair share deal, as you'll see, what the Korea has done will create exactly that kind of a chilling effect, where people, when they put up a video, now they'll have to worry about being charged every time some people on the other side of the world views that video. Now, even if you limit the imposition of the cost for sending traffic to only the big techs, the cost is bound to trickle down to the users so that they'll still be under this chilling effect. The problem doesn't stop there. Once we change this setup where people are not charged for sending or receiving internet traffic, if you taint this setup, then the telcos will see the opening and they'll start trying to exploit that opening to widen the gap, to charge, to draw as much profit out of that opening as possible. And that will even make inclusion of the rural areas, inclusion of the unconnected people even more difficult as telcos engage in more rent-seeking behavior. So I hear the talk of raising money for building more networks. Now, that policy objective of raising money, I mean, you can raise money from big companies, you can raise money from foreign companies, you can raise money from rich people. That's all good. The government should do whatever it takes to raise money for building networks. But that policy objective should be completely separate from how the cost of data delivery has been, shared on the internet, which means you pay to connect, not to deliver or receive traffic. So, now I want to talk about the Korea situation. Now, Korea has instituted partially the sender payroll, where the sender of the sending ISP will pay the receiving ISP for the amount of data traffic. Now, what it means is that if one ISP hosts a content provider that's popular with not just that ISP's customers, but also other ISP customers, then a lot of data traffic will have to be sent out of that ISP to other ISPs, which means that ISP will have to keep paying other ISPs for hosting a popular content provider. Now, that will reduce the competition among ISPs to host popular content providers. What ends up happening is that because of the low competition that was instituted in 2016, and that has lowered the competition, which means the internet access fees. I just told you that you pay to connect to the internet, right? So the internet access fees that were charged on the companies have skyrocketed, where it has become, let me share the screen. Let's see. So you can see on the right side, this is official data from Telegeography, which is the data bank for all the ISPs around the world. You can see the cost is 10 times, actually 8 times Paris. Now, this was the data from 2016, and now the internet access fees is Seoul is 8 times London and 10 times Frankfurt. So these are the fees that are charged on the senders of the traffic. Now, this has caused, of course, a lot of problems for startups and for the internet ecosystem. So this impact of this partial sender pay rule, basically, the arrangement of charging the sender of traffic, the impact is devastating. So since Naver and Kakao, which are two dominant platforms in Korea, Korea has never seen a unicorn. So you can see how this has really limited the choice for consumers. Local video services drop out of competition against YouTube and other foreign content providers because of high internet access fees. So Africa TV in 2017, that's the biggest multi-channel network other than YouTube, was paying internet access fees that are equal to their profit. And Watcha, which is Korea's answer to Netflix, it's a domestic video service, in 2021 was paying 10% of its revenue as internet access fees. So this has really created an environment, hostile environment for Korean startups, and many of them have moved their operation to overseas, like Silicon Valley, where the internet access fees are cheaper. And this also has created problem for foreign content providers that are not that have to pay the local ISPs, and their access fees have increased so much that recently Twitch has pulled out of the Korea market because of the high access fees that are charged by Korean ISPs. I think it's very important that the rule or the principle of the principle by which the cost of data delivery has been shared globally around the world is preserved through any attempt, any policy of promoting network build out. And if that is changed, it will be a big mistake for the internet ecosystem, and it will make network inclusion more and more difficult in the future as the rent-seeking behavior, rent-seeking behavior of ISPs intensify. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much for this, KS. Thank you very much. If you could also stop sharing the presentation so that we can advance. Yeah, I think you bring some very important points here, and one of the main takeaways from your presentation is precisely that the introduction of these fair share or even partial fair share policies de facto only produces a shift of rent from technology companies to large operators. Does not necessarily produces an increase in the quality of service or an increase in inclusion or increase on meaningful connectivity. So it's and that is also, I mean, from a Brazilian perspective, it is curious because that there is this kind of proposal, because in Brazil, large operators are extremely lucrative. They have very good, they distribute dividends to shareholders every year. So it's there is not even a need from a Brazilian perspective to this redistribution, further redistribution of wealth. But it's understandable in other countries, this kind of willingness to tax technology companies to use it for infrastructure is more than understandable, but there are probably other ways of doing this. Now, amongst the spectrum of options that we have at our disposal to promote meaningful connectivity, clearly, obviously, also community-based initiatives. We have been working a lot with the IGF Dynamic Coalition Community Connectivity on this over the past 10 years, and Henriette and her colleagues from APC have been key in promoting this initiative and making them concrete, meaning translating policy to initiatives and concrete initiatives into policy suggestions. So Henriette, it's a great pleasure to have you with us today, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Luca. Can you hear me clearly? Good. I think the advantage of coming last is that the problem has been outlined so well by all the other speakers. And I think that is really the message that we want the G20 and the T20 process to take seriously. I'm speaking to you from South Africa, next year's G20 chair. And I think that's a strength, that we are able to make this connection between India, Brazil, and South Africa, and hopefully have some hard recommendations emerging from this process. I think, as others have outlined, the inequality, digital inequality, persists. And I think what has been very powerful about the concept of meaningful connectivity is that it's helped to reveal that. It's helped to reveal that increased mobile coverage is not enough, that increased internet penetration is not enough. And that's why it's such a powerful concept for us to work with. I think perhaps the one thing that's really particular for us here in Africa is the differences in how markets have evolved, these different market ecosystems. In developed countries, you have a dual ecosystem where you have fixed infrastructure and mobile infrastructure working in a very complementary way and providing ease and opportunity for users. But in many emerging markets, and this is particularly true in Africa, but also in parts of Asia and Latin America, is that it's the mobile broadband market that's the predominant ecosystem, because there's a historic lack of major fixed line telecom infrastructure. There just never was sufficient copper, cable, and fiber. And while the mobile revolution has allowed these emerging markets to leapfrog to some extent, it hasn't generated the kind of diversified markets, diversified infrastructural ecosystems that you really need to create that kind of back end that's needed to support meaningful connectivity. Now, I think I'll jump straight to what the organization I'm part of, still Association for Progressive Communications, started exploring several years ago, community-centered connectivity or community-centered connectivity provision as an alternative solution. So initially, they were community networks organized, built by small organizations, often in rural areas or in poor urban areas. And they were established as an alternative to mainstream or mobile networks, as an alternative to the limitations of zero-rated services. But over the years, through the research that we've done and through the experience and partnership that we've gained, we now look at community-centered connectivity provision as a solution that can be scaled, and as a solution that, if it's enabled by policy and recommendation, regulation, and enabled by financing mechanisms, can really be a driver for the kind of agency that is needed to achieve meaningful connectivity. We talk now about 3 types of community-centered connectivity provisions or providers. The first type is the community networks. These are the ones that we've been working with. In fact, the APC initiative that works on local access is a partnership with Rizomatica based in Mexico. We also have partners in Brazil. And these are communities, for example, in the Amazon, where small organizations working with local people created their own infrastructure. The second category is municipal networks. And I think municipal networks, ironically, are probably most prevalent in the United States. But different levels of municipality, different sizes of municipality have the potential, from small local councils to village councils in rural areas to larger and medium-sized cities, have the potential of creating infrastructure that's also community-driven and community-owned. And in the third category that we now are working in more are social enterprises, small, medium, and micro enterprises, businesses, where local entrepreneurs are seeing a gap in the market and are building infrastructure. Now, why this is so powerful, and I think all the previous speakers have touched on this to some extent, but if you have some control, if the people that are intended to make use of the connectivity, to benefit from it, to get meaning from it, are also part of the process of creating that connectivity, managing it, and shaping it, then there's a much closer connection between the infrastructure, how it's made available, on what basis, on what cost, and how it's being used to create content, to support local businesses, to connect with local healthcare initiatives, cultural and educational initiatives. So that connection between the demand side, investing in content and capacity, and the supply side, the provision of infrastructure, is much more dynamic and it's much more localized. And people have agency about how they evolve and develop that relationship. And where do we think this needs to go, and why is this so important? I think it's important because digital inequality persists. And what we've seen is, and what can really enable community-owned, community-centered connectivity as a solution are, in fact, fairly minor changes in policy and regulation. It involves regulators diversifying market structure, creating opportunities, licensing opportunities for smaller operators, for local operators. And the goal here should not just be to lower the barrier of entry for these community-based operators, but to actively enable their entry into the market. And secondly, financing. Financing is absolutely vital. I believe there is discussion in Brazil about using the Universal Service Fund to support community networks. Kenya is doing the same thing. But we need blended finance mechanisms. So we need mixes of local entrepreneurial investment, foreign investment, loan capital, and community cooperative investments. And I think that's one of the gaps that we see at the moment in how the access market is being looked at, that there's a lack of creativity at that level of creating diverse and blended financing mechanisms to support the creation of this community-owned infrastructure. And then thirdly, you need capacity development and partnership, networks, sharing of experience, sharing of solutions, and you need partnership at the local community level, but also at a level between different countries with similar contexts. For example, our community network deployers in Brazil work very closely with those in Colombia, and those in South Africa are working very closely with those in Kenya, and those in India are collaborating with those in Indonesia. And sometimes there are similar contexts where that experience and sharing that experience can really strengthen the agency. We've released a study. I hope we can share the URL on the website. Recently, with the Internet Society and Connect Humanity, on financing mechanisms for locally owned infrastructure. And we really want to take this discussion forward. We're talking with regulators in many parts of the world, and we're also talking with development finance institutions. And we feel this conversation about supporting locally owned community-based connectivity provision needs to not just be located in the internet community and in the meaningful connectivity movement, but it needs to be taken to the development finance people as well. Thanks very much, Luca, for including us in this really interesting and important conversation.
Thank you very much, Henriette, for your remarks. And indeed, also, thank you for stressing that South Africa will be the next host, having next rotating presidency of the G20. And the previous one was India. This year is Brazil. Is also, for those of us that work on BRICS grouping, very interesting to see this IMSA triad, this IMSA troika that is bringing to the international arena a lot of key discussion for the global South that have been either considered as solved or only considered from a very developed country perspective, and that have very different flavors in the global South. And indeed, the meaningful connectivity or connectivity in general issue is one of these key issues. We have seen a lot of different options. Again, I think what is important to reiterate here is that none of them is a silver bullet to solve the problem. And I think what is clear for our discussion is that the discussion itself is extremely multidimensional and very complex. We have the adoption of a systems approach, as Sonia was reminding us, is key to tackling, to understanding the complexity, and then to be able to produce the set of solutions that together have to work to solve the problem, and the problems that may even differ from country to country. Now, let's enter the last phase of our workshop with some Q&A. We have some questions that have been posted by the participants online in our Slido platform that is linked in the description of the YouTube video. So the first one is from Paula Lima, asking how should countries address fundamental rights to achieve meaningful connectivity. It is quite a relevant question. Then we have two other questions. One relates to meaningful connectivity as a means to support AI innovations. I'm not sure that it's only AI, but we can speak about innovation in general. So meaningful connectivity as a key enabler as innovation, and then what kind of evidence exists from the global south about this, and then how the government can expand partnerships to build and finance, and this is something that Henriette was touching upon, and also Sonia, digital infrastructure needed to achieve the SDGs. A lot of very interesting questions. I'm sure there will be some interesting remarks from the participants. If you want to be the first replying, you can raise your hand using the Zoom feature. Yes, go ahead and raise your hand. I see that KS has unmuted his mic. Is because you want to be the first one, KS?
Well, I was not trying to respond to a question. Just wanted to show this one one slide here, which I had created to kind of show the probable impact of changing the rule of how the data delivery cost has been crowdsourced in the internet, which means if we violate net neutrality, if we start charging for internet traffic, I just happen to use Brazil as an example. On the side, you can see the Gangnam Style video star Psy is complaining how now he's being charged for data. His music video being downloaded in Brazil when local ISPs begin charging for data traffic. I think a fair share deal is exactly, or fair share plan is what's gonna bring about result like this. So just that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kies, for this. Also for, yes, this is something that you were mentioning in your presentation before, also the risk that in terms of digital fragmentation, internet fragmentation, and this kind of policy may produce. And so when we, again, when we speak about connectivity, when we speak about fair share proposal, we really have to understand all the ample spectrum of negative and positive externalities that each kind of choice may imply. Who wants to be the next to, yes, I see Graciela. Please, Graciela, the floor is yours.
No, actually, I'm just going to give very brief comments concerning the questions that were done, and thank you very much for that. But like from the perspective of a researcher, so I'll give the hard questions to my colleagues here. Like the first one is when they mentioned, like Paula Lima, right? Mentioned about how could we try to arise the perspective of meaningful connectivity through human rights. I guess like one first step, but it's not the only one for sure, is try to measure what it means meaningful connectivity and the size of the gap that we are reproducing in our environments, right? Like if we don't show the importance of to understand this concept, and I can give an example that I didn't present before, but in Brazil we just look this strong correlation between meaningful connectivity levels and the type of activities that people do online. So if they don't have the proper access, they don't have any way to enjoy the opportunities that the network brings, and even more, they don't have the capacity to try to mitigate the risks as well. So this is why we have to address this as a very fundamental tool that people have the right to have. And the second question, very briefly, is about AI. I don't think that meaningful connectivity is like a background to prepare ourselves for AI, but for sure, with the development of AI tools and in the adoption in the different sectors of society, those who doesn't have the proper connectivity will be left behind. And we are going to increase the gap that already exists. So we have to take particularly a very good care of those who are still missing in the quality of connection in order to avoid this increasing of inequalities that are already huge enough in our countries.
Thank you very much for this, Graciela. And indeed, actually, we have at the center been working a lot over the past year and a half on AI sovereignty and AI and connectivity, meaningful connectivity. We consider it in our work one of the key enablers of AI sovereignty, because I think that what happened in Brazil and in the global south over the past, and in India over the past years, is very telling of the fact that if you have access, meaningful access to the internet, if you can not only be a consumer of predefined applications, but also a producer and share whatever you want without caring about specific models that restricts the way, not only in which you can share content, but innovation. I believe this is one of the key reasons why prohibiting zero rating in India was one of the major digital sovereignty measures adopted over the past decade, is because it unleashed innovation by Indians. They can share whatever innovation they want, and they consume whatever innovation they want. And this is a key consideration if we want to have AI strategies for, and that is actually a connection with the first webinar we had a couple of months ago about AI governance in the global south, in the G20. The fact that considering connectivity as a key enabler is essential if you want to promote creation, development of innovation in the entire world, and not only concentrate it in very few countries and very few corporations, and then having the rest of the world being only a consumer of what is supplied to them through decision of external actors. I see Sonia and then Renata willing to chip in. Sonia, please.
Yes, very quickly, and I apologize, I've been struggling with a terrible cold. So I just wanted to point out, sorry, one of the things that I didn't share, but we've been working on, actually, why does the Renata go and then I'll come back?
Please have a glass of water, and you can go ahead. Please, Renata, the floor is yours. I think you are muted. Yes.
Yes. I was looking for the mic. Thank you. Well, in regard of the question, Paula, I think that the very concept of meaningful connectivity is a way, if I understand well her question, is a way of bringing the aspects of human rights into the discussion of how populations use digital technologies. It introduces aspects of skills development and critical use of technologies that we have become naturalized in a society in a very, very problematic way, because we didn't question why we are using some kinds of platforms, why the design of that platforms is needed, and all these debates that we have to address in a more critical way. So in my perspective, the question is the concept of meaningful connectivity contributes with this critical approach that society need to have when we are discussing digital technologies. And regarding AI, I think it is exactly reflecting how the deepening of skills and rights are essential for reduces the negative impacts and negative externalities that AI can bring to society. So I think, of course, there are a lot of dimensions of all these two questions, but that's what I have to say about this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Renata, for this, and then hoping that Sonia has survived. Thank you very much, Sonia, for
Thank
being
you.
again with us.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. Apologies for that. Actually, Renata and Graciela already answered very well some of the points, so I'm not going to cover those. What I was trying to say is that on the financing side, I feel that we also need to be a bit more creative. And you know, the way over time there's been this attempt to really focus on partnerships. I'm so sorry. Partnerships that are just public and private. I think now we need to think about community and public, community and private, and have these. I'm terribly sorry, but more creative ways of thinking about finance. There are different kinds of partnerships.
This is actually a really excellent point, and we have. I remember that a couple of years ago at the IGF we published a report on community networks, and precisely one of the key considerations was to try to foster multi-stakeholder partnership, not only private-public partnerships. There is nothing against the private-public partnership, but maybe they are not the only type of partnership that we should consider. And there are a lot of other types that should also include the communities that are the direct recipients of the policy, or can even be the drivers of the policy and the innovation and the construction of the infrastructure, as in the case of community networks. All right, do we have any final remarks by anyone to conclude? Otherwise, we have almost reached the end of our workshop. Do we have any final remarks?
Look, I'll just make a very brief remark. I think also in response to Paula Lima's question, I think that the concept of meaningful connectivity really challenges us to look at rights not in abstract as they exist within legal frameworks, but rights as they are enjoyed by individuals, by communities, as they are making a difference. And I think what we found about the solution of community-owned connectivity is that it can reinforce campaigns or efforts to achieve human rights of indigenous groups, for example, who feel that their language is being marginalized. By creating their own internet infrastructure, their own content, their own community network, they can use that to create content in local languages, make that available in schools. Similarly, feminist groups can create their own network infrastructure where they feel they're empowered and free from gender-based violence. So I think it comes with challenges as well, because it does mean that there can be different approaches to content and the availability of content shaped by individual community decision. But it also just creates that agency where people come together and say, we will use the internet to bring meaning to our lives and to be able to enjoy our human rights. And they become active implementers of that, not just recipients, relying on the goodwill of others to ensure they have access to those rights.
Excellent concluding remarks. Thank you very much for this, and also for having contributed a lot to this ongoing discussion and trying to this building effort and this connecting effort that we are trying to develop with this series of webinars on digital policies in the G20, also to understand how intimately related all these issues are. We have been speaking about AI governance, then information integrity, today meaningful connectivity. The next one will be on platform regulations in the G20 on 27th of May, and then we will conclude with cybersecurity in the G20 on the let me check the date, 27th on June. Let me also remind you that we are organizing also CPDP Latam, the Latin American version of edition of CPDP in July of this year, 17 and 18 of July, which will be dedicated to data governance from Latin America to the G20 and would also be an official side event of the T20, also precisely to try to bring to the fore also this need to speak about data strategies, data policies, and data governance, which surprisingly has not been included as a priority by the Brazilian government, but which is probably the connectivity tissue of all the issues that we are exploring along this series of webinars. Let me also thank our partners in the organization of the webinar, IDEC, represented here today by Roy, Consumers International, the UN, University, and especially the Unu-Egov Unity. Unfortunately, Laisa had to drop out of the call today, but we are very proud to have such relevant partners, and not only for this specific initiative, but for so many other projects that we are doing. It has been a very productive discussion. We will release the report and also the recording of this on the website of the Cyber BRICS project of Cts-Fgv next week. Thank you very much to everyone for the excellent presentations and comments, and I wish you an excellent afternoon or evening wherever you are. Thank you. Bye-bye.